name's Eris Weaver. I'm the Executive Director of the Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition, and I am so pleased to be bringing this panel to you today on how does active transportation get funded. One of the things that took me a long time to learn in my role as an advocate, and that I hear from other activists and advocates, is this frustration about, well, why can't we just do it? Why does it all have to take so long? Where does the money come from? And there's a lot of moving parts in all of this. And so my staff person, Emily, put together this stellar panel of experts in our local area to share their wisdom with all of us, both so that we understand the flow of how transportation projects get funded and where we as advocates and activists are best able to influence the outcome of projects or the planning of projects. Let me do a quick intro of everybody. We have in the house, in no particular order, James Cameron, who's been working for the Sonoma County Transportation Authority and Regional Climate Protection Authority since 2012. He became executive director in 2023. So he is responsible for securing and coordinating regional, state, and federal funding for local programs and projects related to transportation and climate change, managing the Measure M sales tax, as well as the Go Sonoma sales tax that will come later, overseeing long-range planning and collaborating with various partner agencies and all of our cities. He is a licensed civil engineer and land surveyor with over 20 years experience working on all of these different kind of projects. So welcome, James. Next, we also have Victoria Fleming, who's been serving on the Santa Rosa City Council since 2018. She is a supporter of active transportation, and she is a representative to the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, which is the regional agency overseeing the 9-county Bay Area that helps manage funding coming to us from this state and other sources. Victoria's also been on the Sonoma County Commission on the Status of Women, the League of Women Voters, and the Sonoma County Democratic Central Committee. Johannes Hoervertz, and I hope I pronounced that all correctly, is the director of Sonoma County Public Infrastructure, managing road and bridge construction, maintenance, airport operations, waste management, transit services, water districts, a whole lot of the stuff that makes the county run. They employ 270 people and have a budget of $240 million a year. He is also an engineer and has been with SPI since 2015. Larry Zimmer is director and city engineer for the City of Healdsburg Public Works and Transportation Department, and has 32 years of public service experience. He started out working with Caltrans and has been working in Sonoma County for 20 years. He is experienced in grant writing and implementation and has been responsible for several road diet projects, bike facilities, and the gorgeous roundabout in Healdsburg. He is a cyclist and advocate for complete streets. Next, I'm going to hand it over to our moderator for the evening, Tim Zahner. Tim is the executive director of the Sonoma Valley Tourism Bureau. He is on the Bicycle Coalition's Advisory Council and just an all-around good guy. And I am now going to, a couple other housekeeping things before I hand it over. This is a webinar, so chat has been disabled and you are not allowed to unmute yourself. However, we do have a Q&A function enabled. So please do, at any point when you have a question, go ahead and put it in the Q&A. And Emily and I will be sort of monitoring that and helping feed those to the panelists. And hopefully we will have some time at the end for more comment and a little bit of something more conversational. But in the short term, go ahead and feel free to put stuff in the Q&A. We also have closed captioning enabled for any of those who might need that. Exactly where it is on your screen depends on what device you're using. So I'm not sure that I can help you with that. But I think that is it. We've also maybe putting some links in the Q&A for a cheat sheet for all the acronyms that you'll be hearing bandied about, all the alphabet soup of government agencies, as well as any other information and bios on the speakers on our website and such. So with all of that said, I will now hand it over to Tim.
Thank you, Eris. I don't know where you are on other people's screens, but I feel like it's a Brady Bunch thing here. So, so glad to see everybody. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And hopefully we get some good information out of this. We are just going to kind of like hopefully have a free flowing conversation. I'll ask questions. If people want to jump in and interrupt each other, please do it politely. But I'll start off by asking some stuff that we've done already. So first things first, what is active transportation and how is it different from other modes of transportation? James, can you start off by talking about what is active transportation?
Sure. Active transportation is what some of you may have previously referred to as bicycle and pedestrian transportation, or active modes, right? Walking, riding your bike, rolling. It is a means of transportation that allows you to typically travel very short distances efficiently, right? Where we don't need to rely on our car to get around. We have these other modes. It also connects you to your vehicle. It connects you to transit, primarily focus on bicycle and pedestrian modes of travel.
Okay. And if any of our panelists disagree with James, just raise your hand and just rip into him. So can I ask, with active transportation, is what we're talking about, how does that get funded? And how does that compare to other types of transportation like roads and buses and rail? Because I think oftentimes people conflate them all differently. Johannes or Larry, do you guys want to try to answer that one?
I'll take a stab, Tim. Like Eris mentioned, we have, for example, the airport, we have transit in the county, and we have bike path and bike lanes. How we connect them is very challenging, as you can imagine. The funding for the airport or the funding for bridges or roads cannot be used for active transportation. So typically we relied on federal grants, CMAQ, congestion mitigation air quality funding, and local funding to build some of our infrastructure when it comes to active transportation. That's kind of how we do it in the county. And the county is a little bit challenging also because we don't have typically curb and gutter and all of the amenities that you would see in a city like Healdsburg, for example. And I'll tag it to Larry now.
Yeah, Larry, you want to pick up on that?
Yeah, they're a little bit different in Healdsburg. There is some competition between pavement and active transportation, although I would argue that cyclists and other modes of transportation need the roads as well as cars. But some of our funding comes from a local tax measure, as well as our county tax measure. Much of that funding can go for active transportation or vehicular transportation. So there is a little bit of the trying to keep up with it all. There isn't enough money to do everything. So we are trying to do the best we can. Usually what we do is we focus on leveraging that money. So when we have the local tax money or the money that's coming through SCTA, we're using that to match grant funding. And so then that becomes the priority. And for Healdsburg in our current condition, most of our money is going towards matching some very large grants that we have. So we're finding ourselves a little bit short on just the general roadway rehab because we're spending so much time working on complete streets projects, or so much money, excuse me.
And Larry, real quickly, can you short, what is a complete street? What does that mean?
A complete street is basically you're looking at all modes of transportation. We do that and this has been going on for really everyone that I know within Sonoma County, the public works, the engineers. Whenever we're doing a project, we look, what can we do to improve pedestrians, the pedestrian access, the cyclists going through that same corridor.
Okay.
Can't always accommodate it, but we're looking at it.
Got it. Yeah, it's the dream. Victoria, going over to you, you know, in Santa Rosa, there have been a lot of different projects around active transportation. As an elected official, is this a priority you feel for Santa Rosa, or is it something that's kind of an afterthought? This is where no one's listening. You can just tell me the truth. On how do you think Santa Rosa is doing and funding it and implementing it?
Well, thanks for the question, Tim. I can see that 21 people are listening. I think it's mostly our choir, so I think we're in safe hands here. The thing is that what we're seeing, you know, far and wide is that councils are putting this at the top of their priorities. And over again, the city of Santa Rosa continues to say that it's a priority, and the dollars haven't followed the prioritization. And I think that there's some structural causes having to do with that. But I think as we continue to have a greater commitment to Vision Zero, which for lay people is the idea that nobody should die as a result of an interaction with a car, a vehicle, right? That as we continue to see an uptick, I've had one intersection in my district at Orchard and College, you know, have multiple, you know, fatalities just recently. People are really starting to get tired of cars determining the agenda. And so it's not that cars shouldn't have good infrastructure, it's that we need to balance out the cost of that with the cost to human life and safety, as well as the general cost to our longevity based on the sedentary lifestyle that we have when we build around the motor vehicle as we have.
That's a great point. I know some people, or one of the attendees I saw us in the Blue Zone group in Petaluma, and kind of how do you literally, you know, active transportation is a way to make transportation affordable, right? You don't need a driver's license and a car, so it's easy to get around, but also it's literally better for you.
Right. But I really want to you asked me, is it a priority? And I kind of hedged and I said, it's a priority, but it's not well funded. And if you look at the definition of priorities and funding, if you don't fund it, it's not really a priority, right? So we're at this like pivotal point of like saying it is because there's pressure. And I think in an ideal world, we want it to be, but not having necessarily the political willingness to fully fund it, and not having the staff support, staff continually giving recommendations counter to the investment necessary to make this pivotal change. It's going to happen. And it doesn't mean that staff are trying to circumvent councils in any way. It just means that there's a long history of how things are supposed to be or should be. And now we're trying to change that. And it's really difficult to get everybody on board. But I don't think there's bad actors or something like that. I think it's just a process of bringing everyone along.
Is there like a lot more institutional inertia and like budget inertia and things like
yeah, I don't even think that. I just think that, you know, when you go to school to be, I'm not a traffic engineer, but I think when you go to school to be a traffic engineer, you're a traffic engineer. And when you go to school to do roads as we know them, I mean, in California, we spent decades building our cities and city planning around cars. So it's no one's fault. That's how our city planners and our engineers are trained. And then the politicians who come in for 2, 4, 6 years and leave are like, this is, you know, what we want now. You know, I mean, maybe it's a passing fancy. And I think it's going to have to be kind of like housing has been in Sonoma County. It's going to have to be something that's demonstrated over decades to staff and from with the public's backing, in order to make it really clear that this is not a whim. This is the way things are done in much of the world. And we certainly are smart enough here in the wealthiest country in the world to get it done.
Can I follow up with that, the point about staffing then, and throw it to James? James, which cities or governments that you know of have staff where active transportation, you know, not freeway engineer, not road person, but like active transportation is in their job title and they have the ability to affect change?
Yeah, I would love to go back to the fund source question at some point too, if you want a description of a bunch of them. But to answer your question with regard to dedicated staff, so we deal with all 10 jurisdictions within Sonoma County that are the 9 cities as well as the county itself. Santa Rosa has a dedicated active transportation planner as well as a dedicated transportation planner to facilitate projects and the development of the projects that are typically delivered by project managers and engineers, you know, working through the development phases of actually, you know, the work that happens in the field, the construction. Also, Petaluma has an active transportation planner. They actually poached that individual from Santa Rosa, and he's been doing a great job down there in Petaluma, advocating for their active transportation needs, as well as their other project needs as well. The other jurisdictions, we primarily deal with engineers who have to wear two hats, right? They have to wear this funding hat that is typically can be geared more towards a planner position. And then they have to put back on their engineer hat, which is like your plans and specifications, dealing with the contractor, the challenging part of delivering a project. At SCTA, what we really like to do is we like to take our sales tax and have it be leveraged, like Larry said, right? And so when you leverage other funds, now you're talking about delivering projects with multiple fund sources. From an engineering standpoint, I can tell you, I was in project delivery at the city of Santa Rosa. I would much rather prefer to deliver a project with one fund source, and that not having to deal with that fund source, and be able to deal with this project has gone through some sort of advanced planning. It's gone through some additional scoping and incorporated in the CIP. It's been scoped and handed to you as a project manager to deliver. And if you don't have to spend tracking multiple fund sources, and you can spend the time actually getting the design correct, it's the work that you've been trained as an engineer to do, as opposed to dealing with multiple fund sources.
Okay. And just real quick, you mentioned, James, you wanted to talk about how things were funded. Freeways are paid solely through gas taxes, right? Because we're all driving Teslas and Priuses, and they are 100% funded through gas taxes.
So freeways are primarily funded through gas taxes. I can tell you that at SCTA, right, we manage 0.25% sales tax for transportation. I like to refer to that transportation sales tax as Go Sonoma. You'd call it the Go Sonoma Act or the Go Sonoma Measure. That is the reauthorization of what was referred to as Measure M. It passed on the ballot in November of 2020 as Measure DD. The original Measure M did have 40% of that sales tax measure that was not gas tax, that went to widening Highway 101. But as we pivot and focus on those active and shared modes, as well as our Vision Zero goals, the voters, when they approved the updated Go Sonoma measure, or reauthorization, which is Go Sonoma, there was a significant shift in that funding strategy. The Highway 101 program was completely eliminated, so that $0 of Go Sonoma goes to the Highway 101 program. The bikeways and pathways component was tripled compared to what it was in Measure M. The bus categories were more than doubled. Move traffic and improve safety, which is really focusing on those local roads, had a significant increase of close to 50%, and the smooth and maintained roads, or maintaining roadways, actually almost doubled. Realizing all of those categories, there, aside from the transit category that's focused primarily on operating costs of transit, which you can say that transit is an active mode, getting to and from transit. All of those categories are eligible for active transportation funding.
So, James, just to clarify, for the future, you're saying after 101's done.
No, the future is here now. So the sales tax measure revenue will start in April 1st of 2025. But because of some older projects within Measure M that are not advancing due to things like SB 743, which is the increase, which is tracking of vehicle miles traveled as a metric and a policy position to be able to advance projects, we are able to take those dollars from those projects that aren't advancing and loan them to the Go Sonoma Act projects. And SCTA has done its first round of programming for Go Sonoma. Okay. So it's here now, and it is moving forward with that shift. Now, with the project development phases and how long it takes to actually deliver projects, the public doesn't see that until those investments hit the street. So those investments will begin next fiscal year, and then it will be over time, as you'll see, or that event, that policy position actually take place in the physical world or built environment.
Okay. I appreciate this introduction. This is good. And we haven't, we've kind of briefly on it. I want to get to the meat of it. We have 23 advocates watching this right now. What are the steps they can take to advocate? And I'm assuming most of them want more, active transportation options. So I'm going to throw it out. What steps can advocates take to increase or improve the attention and the money that we're giving to active transportation? Does someone want to hop on that one first?
Sure.
Larry.
I'll just weigh in a little bit. I think sometimes people's involvement is a little bit too late. And so getting involved in the planning process is probably most beneficial. Every city had a bike and pedestrian plan. We now call them active transportation plans. And these things go out to the public. They show up at city councils. This is a great time to get involved because this is what our guidance is moving forward. We use this document when we are applying for grant funding. We use this document when we're doing other projects and say, what else is in the area? What else can we improve on? And so these set our priorities.
So Larry, when you guys are doing those workshops, those open houses, show up to those.
Yes.
And be involved. Okay. Victoria, do you feel that elected officials, when we create, I'm always skeptical because we create these big PDFs and for some reason they're always printed out in 11 by 17 paper on like 9-point font. And then these are plans. Do you feel like city councils are listening to that when they get to the budgeting process or is it working? Nobody's listening, so you can tell the truth.
I think that city councils hear what is the top line. And the top line is, my kid is in a coma, or now my child is deceased as a result of an interaction with a vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
And that's highly motivating.
Right.
There will be some council members who will read the 9-point font with the 12 other committees that they sit on, right? But more likely, the story, the anecdote is going to be more salient than the plan, which I think is what really, and to my mind, the plan is not for the council members. The plan is for the staff.
To activate on, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, council members should rarely be getting involved in a really detailed manner in the execution of any sort of capital improvement plan. We should be setting the policies and dedicating the funding and giving direction to our city managers or county administrators or executives, as the case is now, to hire people who are going to do those things.
Okay. I have one, you answered an earlier question. CIP was a capital improvement project. Then you also put capital improvement plan because someone put that in there, James. I think you use CIP as an acronym. So you get -1 point from before. Johannes, do you ever see like these plans? Do they work directly with your stuff, or is this not part of your world?
It is, and I agree with Victoria that if you're going to prioritize, you should fund and allocate the resources to staff to do the work. But I've heard the interaction between vehicles and bicycles and pedestrians. So that's up to us, the engineers and whoever is planning the facilities, because the facilities are so different from Larry, for example, in the city of Healdsburg, to a bike lane or a bike path that you would build in the county. So there's, when you go from urban to suburban to rural areas, those facilities change, and we need to be aware of that. The picture that you have behind your background would probably not apply on a high speed, narrow road, for example. Yes, then no, the other one.
That's Arnold Drive, and that I don't know where I got that one.
Yeah.
So, but that's a good point. I was going to ask who does a really good, other than Sonoma County, which is always perfect. Who does a really good job, and is similar to us in both these sort of urban and rural, and even our urban's not that big of a city. It's definitely spread out, but
Mhm.
who's doing a good job?
City of Davis.
Davis.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's, sitting,
Davis had like the first bike lanes like in 1960 or something like that.
Yeah.
That was gonna be my other backdrop. What did Davis have that we didn't? Like what did they do?
You know, I don't know enough to speak intelligently, but they just seem to have been doing a lot of things first before, other agencies would try something, they've done it. And so I often look to Davis when I'm considering how we solve a problem.
Do you think, and the three of you are all engineers, right? James, Johannes, and Larry. Like you guys have to take a test, and you have this cool ring, and you put your little initials next to stuff. Do you think engineers are a little more conservative because they're worried about we haven't tried it, so we're not going to do it until someone else does it? Or is it an example where like we're going to do this little corner over here, or this little street through Santa Rosa? We're going to narrow those lanes or something like
So
that.
no one's listening to him?
No one's listening,
Yeah.
just Victoria. She's the only one listening.
Yes, there is some of that.
Yeah.
There is there's the legal concerns. We get sued all the time. We get sued when we've done nothing wrong. And if you cannot defend your design with some standard, with something somewhere, you're liable, and you're probably going to lose when somebody gets hurt. So I fall back on the standards, whether it's Caltrans or AASHTO, the American Society of Highway Transportation. There's all kinds of them out there. And if you've got something that you can point to, that it has been looked at, it has been approved, it has been used, it's much more defendable.
Okay.
Yeah, Tim, I was going to start my answer with we're not as conservative as county council or some of our attorneys, right? I'm willing to try anything. I've even gone to the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices board in the state to change the standard or make it work for our roads, where we can have more room for bicycles and the striping because the roads are narrow. But sometimes our county councils are difficult to work with, and it goes back to what Larry's saying, that the legality of it. I think that we have enough tools in our toolbox to provide, transportation. We're funded, safe transportation. We're working, and your picture, we're working on Arnold Drive. We have some really cool projects that we're working on in the county, Crocker Road Bridge. We have a really cool project in Forestville, and those are your traditional bike lanes. And those we don't have any issues with. High-speed roads are challenging, River Road, and people want to bike on those, so those are a little bit more challenging.
Right. Okay. Shifting gears a little bit, I've heard about something called Plan Bay Area 2050, and I don't know if that's like some sort of government control thing, or if it's like, what the heck is this thing? James told me to talk about it. So Plan Bay Area 2050, what is it, and how can Sonoma County be a part of it? What's going on? James, you want to take that one?
How about I give
or Victoria? Good, go.
And you give another one.
Thank you, Victoria, go.
All right, James and I can do this one together. So Plan Bay Area, the way I look at it is there anybody here who hasn't played SimCity? I mean,
that's how you all become city planners, isn't it? You accidentally play SimCity in high school. Yeah.
Well, I played it and thought it was great, but I didn't know that city planning was a career. Otherwise, I might have done it. But at any rate, the point is that it's this large ranging document that is, similar to SimCity in that you can sort of generally say what you want, but it's more policy than where should the hospital go, where should the road go, but it's not that different from that. And the point in the policy piece is that the 9 Bay Area County region in this document basically says what projects, what ideas, what themes, what sort of like, do we want transit oriented communities, which means that there is housing close to transit for people who don't know the TOC acronym. But it then what it does is if you do have your project or your idea or your designation, your plan area in this document, then you can go out for this funding that you're hearing our lovely engineers here talking about, so that they can stack their capital to get your project done. And if you're left out of it, like let's say Healdsburg extension on SMART, then you have a real difficult time getting your funding. And so it's really like the portal. It's necessary, but not necessarily sufficient to get the money you need to do what you want.
So Victoria, does Plan Bay Area kind of then inform other local active transportation or other local transportation documents?
As far as I know, and James can speak to this more technically, obviously I don't deal with the funding of projects on a granular level, but it's my understanding that if you're not in the plan, it's difficult to get, funding out of the state or the federal government. There are exceptions to that, of course.
James, can you address that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Plan Bay Area, so it's the regional transportation plan for all 9 Bay Area counties. There is extensive what's called programmatic buckets that cover the vast majority of active transportation plans. So when it comes to having an active transportation project within the plan itself, typically the projects that we've seen submitted to SCTA fall into what's called a programmatic bucket. And it allows then for the local jurisdictions to apply for a type of funding that's called OBAG, which stands for One Bay Area Grant. One Bay Area Grant is going to be starting up cycle 4, probably within the next year. And cycle 4 of One Bay Area Grant is going to be informed by Plan Bay Area 2050 Plus, which is an update to Plan Bay Area. When it comes to actual Sonoma County projects that need to be in that plan, there is a very robust transit project that would increase transit across the entire county that is part of that plan. There's also some improvements down on State Route 37 that do take into full active transportation or barrier separated bike and pedestrian facilities.
Wait, James, you're going to put a bike path on 37? Say it, James. No one's listening.
As part of the long-term improvements from the State Route 37 resilient program, there will be a bike path on State Route 37, and it will be paralleled by the Bay Trail. So if you actually want to enjoy yourself and not be next to all that noisy, loud traffic, you'll be able to actually follow the Bay line more than just the traffic itself. So with that, the other project that is part of Plan Bay Area is SMART to Windsor, right? And so SMART north of Windsor is not within Plan Bay Area, but there has been discussion about adding it in Plan Bay Area 2050 Plus to Healdsburg. And SMART has been very successful in going after grant funding without being in the plan, but it is much more challenging to be able to apply for that grant funding. And there's certain categories where you're not even eligible. As soon as you submit, if you're not in the plan, then your application will not even be reviewed by the grantor.
Okay. I appreciate your comments on that, guys. We're actually getting some questions coming in from the people who aren't listening, but evidently they are because they're asking us questions. So first question, I'm going to pot. Second question, because the first question is, hi, Victoria, nice cat. Look at that little cat you got there. That's so cute. So here we go. First question. Is there a connection and a funding connection between safe routes to school and education access and then and other active transportation projects? Basically, how does safe routes to school talk to other active transportation projects? And does anyone know about SRTS? Larry, is that yours?
Yeah, I guess I'll start this one. Maybe, I don't know if Johannes wants to jump in, but part of that question was asking about the education. And we as Public Works Department are often not good at trying to implement that type of thing. It's difficult because it really needs to come from the schools.
Mhm.
It's safe routes to school, and we don't necessarily have access. And people like the Sonoma County Bike Coalition. But I agree that the cities probably need to be more involved on getting that education.
But and that's education in the schools. What about like, hey, safe routes to school? Every school knows that there's like say 300 kids, and they're all going to end up in the same location. So you guys must know, okay, for like a quarter mile out or half mile out, we should really work on the bike and walking infrastructure here.
And that's the part that we do well. We create these safe routes to school plans, and there are some grant funding sources that it's same as being in the local road safety plan or a Vision Zero plan. If you're in a safe routes to school plan, it makes you eligible for certain funding. And so safe routes to school plan is exactly what you described, Tim. It is a certain radius around the school. There are different crosswalks, different color striping, the reflectivity of the signs, all of this goes into the plan. And so pretty much every city engineer, public works department has these, and they're sitting there waiting for the funding to be able to make these improvements. There's usually more than we can get to, but it is always very high on our list, and it is often the first project that gets done are the school related ones for that safety factor. And when things are safer, people are more likely to walk or bike to school, which is the goal.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's a good one. And thank you for the question. I got another question here. Someone went to the Sebastopol Apple Blossom Fair. Thank you for supporting local festivals. And they saw the Sebastopol active transportation plan, but they could not make much sense of it. It was a bunch of spreadsheets. And I got to say this, speaking as a non-engineer, what the hell, engineers? Why can't you guys speak normal language? So what's going on? How can they understand how to read these things? Or how can we teach you guys to speak in plain language?
Well, if it wasn't understandable, I think first of all, it probably could have been written better. Two, my recommendation would be to take that plan, schedule an appointment with the city of Sebastopol, and spend a few minutes having them go through it, explain it so that it's understandable. And
Tim,
almost every agency will be willing to do that.
I'll let Johannes answer. I'll let Victoria go after. Johannes, go.
yeah, Tim, in my experience, the city of Sebastopol has a really good active transportation plan. We've been working with them. I have seen some really cool exhibits. When we go out to do town halls, we bring exhibits, 24 by 36 color, showing, depicting where the bike links are, where the crosswalks are. I think that works better than spreadsheets, but Sebastopol has a really good plan.
Okay. And Victoria, you want to weigh in and just totally tell her, I mean,
Yeah,
it's so terrible.
I
Say
think, so I have a professional license in a totally different domain. And when you're in your thing, you talk your industry speak, and it's how you communicate with your coworkers. No shame on that, right? But in this case, you're communicating with two different audiences. One is, your fellow engineers and builders, and the other is the people who are going to pay for and use the service. And one thing that I think would be really valuable and it's really inexpensive to do is to put your plan through ChatGPT. I know that this will give me some trouble for saying this, but the good one and the upgraded one, which will know how to read a plan if it's not a drawing, but sometimes it can actually read a drawing. It's really interesting, and ask it to put it in plain English.
Yeah.
Because I love the idea of that they'll sit down with you, but a lot of people just aren't going to spend that kind of time with a document.
Yeah, I'm with you in ChatGPT, Victoria.
Yeah,
Helpful.
work and then have it translated.
it helps. It helps us speak engineer. I love it.
That's right.
And that's good insight. I think you're right, Victoria. Anyone that specializes in one thing and then you try to bring it to the layperson, it doesn't exactly translate. You kind of have to do that. Here's another great question.
Let me chime in on that a little bit.
Go ahead, James.
So that was my staff over at the Apple Blossom Festival. I think they were accompanied by some Sebastopol staff as well. we are embarking on a very robust active transportation update for the entire county itself, not just Sebastopol. And where we are in the process is we've done an existing conditions, we've done criteria for how to prioritize projects. We are at a state now in the development of our plan where we are trying to prioritize projects. One way to prioritize those projects is a project list, right? It sounds like the commenter or the question was geared towards this list not being very digestible or understandable. So there is a GIS interface, geographic information system. So those of you that are online savvy and able to go to a website, I think Tim, you might be sharing it later. I could share it in the Q&A as well, where folks can actually see this information graphically and prioritize or pick out their favorite sections of dashed lines on this map that would help us be able to prioritize where you want to see your investments of the Go Sonoma Act going forward. That input will inform folks in Sebastopol for what projects to submit, as well as projects in the unincorporated area surrounding Sebastopol that Johannes's staff would potentially submit for Go Sonoma funding. With all that, being said, we are absolutely open to meeting with any of you that would like to, have a little bit more one-on-one attention. I know our project manager, Dana Teray, is in the audience today, listening, taking in this feedback that her and I will be discussing later as well. So anyways, there's a little bit more on that question I wanted to just feed into.
I appreciate that. And all joking aside, learning to speak engineer, I do know that once you kind of understand it, it is digestible, but it can be daunting when you first see it. And I always say, if I can show it to my mom, who's 80, then, and she can kind of understand it, we're doing okay. I do that with my own marketing. And then if she can't, I got to rework it. Here's a question. It's kind of drilling down, but I think it's an important one, interesting one. It's about bike lanes being green, literally painted green. The question is about, can we paint our bike lanes green throughout the city? Seems like a low cost option, referring to Santa Rosa Avenue. So the city of Santa Rosa, we don't have anyone who's from their actual, bike department here, but is it expensive, guys, to slap green paint down? And is that a new trend, or is that something that's no longer a thing, or what's going on there?
Well, I'll start this one again. Sure. I get this question a lot, and it is my personal opinion. Again, emphasis on personal, that the green should be used at points of conflict. Because yes, to paint all bike lanes green and maintain them is costly. I can't speak for any other cities, but we struggle to keep the white lines and the center line stripe painted as often as it should be. And to paint the area of an entire bike lane, I struggle sometimes seeing the benefit. I do think that the green is really useful and really important in the bike boxes and the transition points. And if you have at the right turn pockets, anytime that you would have the potential conflict between a cyclist and a car. Okay. Johannes, you have input on that?
I agree with you, Larry.
Are there other treatments, like you can see in the photo over my shoulder over here? They use little delineators and stuff like that. Is that a better choice?
Well, it's a different approach. It's different purpose. Okay. But I think those are useful as well.
All right. And we don't need to go into that might be a different webinar, and I apologize for taking us off. We'll go back to some other funding questions that we have. One question we have is, why are there so many different sources of funding? It seems that there are thousands of options, and basic funding helps with grant funding. Is it because the state and federal governments do not prioritize active transport and there's no overarching funding? Basically, how come we don't have a Build Back Better bike lanes thing or something? Like, what's going on here? James, you want to try that one?
Yeah, sure. So let me start out with just voicing a little frustration from my side, right? So the IIJA, right? So this is the the latest federal transportation reauthorization, right? It has all these different fancy names. In the past, you might have heard it be called the FAST Act, the MAP Act, Safety Lou, T21. It's gone through many different iterations. In investments, Infrastructure Investments and Job Act, also referred to as the bill, the bipartisan infrastructure law.
Okay.
It is absolutely daunting how many different individual programs are built into that. So there's a lot of different policy positions or priorities that they're trying to focus on or address with separate grant programs all built into this one surface transportation reauthorization. I can send you a website that would take you an hour to go through all the different grant applications. In my opinion, there is a need to consolidate that, and we are advocating for some consolidation. They had some great existing grant programs that could have just been scaled up significantly instead of adding dozens of additional separate programs. The reason, though, that I just started to allude to as to why there is different programs is different programs are to address different priorities. A good example would be SB1. SB1 is Senate Bill 1 that was passed by the state. So this is, we were talking about federal before, we're talking about state funding now. SB1 was broken into a few different funding categories. One major funding category is to support ATP, or Active Transportation Plan. It was really good how the state and the regions decided to implement that, where they essentially scaled up an existing active transportation program that was already being implemented. Also, then there's other programs that can address freight infrastructure. There's programs that address congested corridors. There's also programs that extend or focus on partnerships. There's a local partnership program that's geared just towards entities like SCTA and our 10 jurisdictions that we collaborate with to be able to leverage those funds. So in short, it's to make sure that the different priorities or policies that when they go through that sausage making process in the legislation are all addressed. And there is some sweet spot. I can tell you the bill IIJA I just talked about didn't hit that sweet spot. It's too big. I think SB1 came a lot closer. I think our Measure M, with really our 4 major categories that have some subcategories, that's now called the Go Sonoma.
Go Sonoma. Thank you, James. Yep.
Yeah, and hit it where we're focused on move traffic and improve safety. We're focused on paving roads. We're focused on active transportation. We're focused on transit. So basically those active and shared modes, as well as implementing our Vision Zero on the local road network.
Okay.
And Tim, part of that question, just 3 seconds. The funding for bike and peds has definitely improved and increased over time. It is noticeable. It used to be capacity increasing, adding more lanes, and then it was all about maintenance and rehab. And it has clearly shifted towards active transportation. There's way more funding than there ever was in my career that I have any memory of.
Yeah, it seems like we wouldn't even be having this conversation 30 years ago. So it's good there. We got a really good question, and this maybe Victoria could talk about it a bit here, and then we'll go to others here. But from Tom, he asked, please discuss the time cycles of various funding sources and where in those timelines that activists have the most influence. So how can the people listening get involved in the different time inflection points?
Yeah, that's actually a pretty technical question that some of the engineers, it sounds like a one for an elected official. I'll give it a shot here because I'm game to try anything. But when a bill becomes law, right, there's, usually like a notice of funding availability, but also there's a plan that comes before it. So hopefully your plan is in place, and then when the funding comes out from the bill and the appropriations to go with it, and then the timeline goes from there. But as far as like the exact timing and timeline of that, I'm not aware of how that works in exact months and years. I just know that it takes about 2 or 3 or 10 times longer than I think it should. And always ends up costing about that same magnitude more. So
Okay, fair enough, Victoria. Victoria, I appreciate you being an elected official. I said I don't know. So
Yeah, no, I don't know.
what are you doing? There's someone else who wants to take a stab at it? Like, what are the? Give us the actual dates, or we just have to go to meetings to get all the money, guys. What's the right answer here? So, do you want me to repeat the question? Like,
Sure.
what are the? Let me see here. The time cycles of various funding sources, and then where in those time cycles or timelines that activists have the influence. So I'm assuming, like James said, we just did the Infrastructure Act. Is that like a 6-year thing, like the Farm Bill kind of thing? And you have one time here, and then SB1 is like, every 2 years kind of thing. What are the cycles here? And then how do we get involved as activists?
The bigger ones probably should come from James, but a bill passes and it takes quite a bit of time. Years, 2 years probably before it starts hitting the streets in the form of a notice of funding opportunity, a NOFO for us. And then there's applications. The applications, have a pretty big window because some of them are huge undertakings, some of them not as much. Then there's a time for going through that process. And then finally they say, yes, you get the grant. And it can be a year from the time you get the notice that says, yes, you can get the grant before you can actually get to the money. And then there is a whole bunch of work if we're talking a federal grant going through Caltrans local assistance to be able to get it authorized so that you are actually able to do the work and start getting the reimbursement.
And Larry, just real quick, by that time you get that grant, is that money you have to specifically ask, I want to build, I want to improve the sidewalk path or the bike path from this street to this street, and we think it's going to cost that much. Do you have to be that granular, or do you just say we want to, make the bike paths better in this area?
It needs to be quite granular. And again, there's different grants and different requirements, but most of the bigger funding, the OBEG, as James referred to, active transportation program grant funding, anything that's going to go through your Caltrans and local assistance, you need to be very specific because you have to get environmental clearance. And so you cannot get that if you don't know what it is you're going to build. And that's part of what Victoria was saying about things costing more, because by the time you go through all of that process, one, it's years later, and two, you know more about what it is you're actually building and what those environmental impacts are, and therefore what the mitigations would be.
Okay. Johannes, anything to jump into that, or you're not going to give me the one date? Just give us the date that we're supposed to show up to the meeting, Johannes. You've got the one date, right?
I tell you what, and I think that really you need to, the activists need to identify what agency is working on planning the active transportation projects. And once those projects are defined, then work with the agency that designs the projects. In some cases, it's not the same agency, Tim, but I can share with you that the Arnold Drive bike project has been worked on for 14, 15 years. I haven't been working it for that long. I've been working for 5 years on that project with Supervisor Gorin. But it's a complex project, environmentally, right-of-way acquisition, drainage, bridges that need to be widened. So keep the pressure on, but early on within the planning stages is where you get the most bang for your buck on influencing a project.
Okay. Appreciate that.
Yeah, and just 30 seconds. The city puts together a general plan. They put together specific plans for certain neighborhoods. They put together these active transportation, the other plans we've talked about. And again, those are our guiding documents. By the time there's a notice for funding and we're applying for a grant, that's where we're going. We're going to these documents that are city council approved, that our city council said, and our community said, these are the priorities. This is what we're selecting from. Not that there aren't some cases where you would choose something slightly different, or maybe very different based on that's the only way you can get this grant funding. But those are our guiding documents, and being involved early is really the key to influencing where work gets done.
So kind of a follow-up of this, we have two questions. This is from Deb. Is it possible to blend bike and ped projects into the LSR 20% and LSP's 20% on the Measure M funding. Deb, I'm going to penalize you 2 points for using 2 acronyms in a row, and also Measure M because it's now Go Sonoma. But is it possible to blend bike and ped projects? James?
Can I give her my negative point from before?
You can also donate your negative point. Yes, thank you.
So then I'm back
No
to-
piling on the point.
No, James, go ahead.
No.
So, yeah. So when it comes to let's talk about the Go Sonoma Act, right? So the Go Sonoma Act is what we're implementing right now, and absolutely, when it comes to the maintenance funds, the complete streets are eligible for improvements that are done with those maintenance funds, right? So we have various policies that are associated with our sales tax measure that have been in place for close to 2 decades now, and that policy is very clear on giving the jurisdiction the option to use those funds in that manner. One example would be a road paving project where you absolutely could go in and, as part of that road paving project, use those Measure M funds to build sidewalks or to build a pathway adjoining that roadway. The other example would be the projects category, which was previously referred to as LSP, local street projects, which is now referred to as move traffic and improve safety. When it comes to building a project that is within that category, same things apply. You could have a cycle track on one side of the street. You could have Class 2 buffered bike lanes. You could have those Class 4 bike lanes. All of those funds are eligible for those improvements as part of the larger project.
Okay. I think we answered that one. This one I'm going to kind of go back. We have 2 questions from Forestville. So West County represent. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, so I'm ready for that, Tim. I wish I could start with one.
They were asking what can they do to encourage bike tourism and get people out there on bikes?
So I see the one that are some type of active transportation projects more likely to succeed in terms of funding than others. And the answer to that is yes. We have a project that we just finished doing. We're going to do a ribbon cutting soon, Mark West Springs Road. That was a sidewalk project, and that goes from Old Redwood Highway to Rebley School. Very good project, moving community members, school, really good funding. We got to fund it. The projects like Arnold Drive or Regal Road in Forestville are very difficult to get funding because they require acquisition of right-of-way to widen the road to build the bike lane. So those are difficult to fund.
So places like Forestville, which are also state, is it 116 is a state road, I believe.
Yeah.
You're also dealing with another agency. Is it hard to get, if we want to make Forestville a bike tourism destination, as 2 as our people asked, what are the steps?
So in Forestville, we have a really cool project that we have designed now, and it goes from Covey to Maribel. Really cool project on both sides of the road of State Route 116. It's been difficult to work with Caltrans to get the permits and everything that we need to do the project. We have the project 99% designed. We're getting ready to go to construction. We're coordinating with the sewer, the agency that works on the sewer in Forestville, but that project is funded and ready to go.
Okay. So it's Forestville. Watch out! You're on your way to becoming in the Netherlands any moment now. It's going to change.
It's going to change the town. I can tell you that when we finish.
Yeah, bunch of Dutch bikes out there any moment.
Yeah,
that would be great. Let me see here. You kind of answered that one beginning of it, but are there other types of active transportation projects more likely to succeed in terms of funding, and which tend to appeal politically? And that's a good question because maybe politically isn't always the best option, but are there some types of active transportation projects more likely to succeed in terms of funding than others? Who wants to take that?
If you're on our high injury network in an equity priority community and have done robust public outreach, you will compete very well for funding on a state and federal stage.
James, could you repeat that? Because that was a lot of words.
So let me just preface that a little bit, James. because that's exactly accurate, but really each grant has its scoring rubric. And you need to hit those points. And those are the points that James just listed that gets you, that will score you enough to get the grant funding.
That's kind of a weird incentive, though. It's like basically you need a lot of people to get hurt so that you can improve the road. That's, I mean, I'm not a behavioral theorist person, but that seems kind of weird. But it makes sense. It makes sense, but it's also, you know, like we're going to wait until someone gets hurt before we improve this road is what the grants are saying to you. Am I wrong?
think if you look at it the other way, Tim,
Okay.
there are so many places, thankfully not in Healdsburg, where there are a fair number of accidents or high injury network. And they want to make sure that the funding is going, or at least a certain portion of the funding is going towards those areas. And if someone else writes a great grant, but it's not part of that high injury network, then maybe, you know, it's not doing what ultimately the grantor wants done.
Okay. A comment and also kind of a question from Michael said, as we advocate for bike and ped infrastructure, I think it's important to fund projects that default to protected or separated bike lanes that local folks will actually use. These bike lane projects should be designed as networks that connect folks to where they need to go. Most of our bike lane infrastructure is not considered safe by most who might choose to ride their bikes, and certainly not by parents who would like their children to ride their bikes. Michael, I would have written that myself. That's because that's exactly it. But it seems that, like, you know, we slap down 3 inches of white paint, and we're like, there's a bike lane, but then no parent's going to allow their 9-year-old to ride to school, you know, on that. So are we going to move to the point where the default is the separated bike lane and like the bike pathway?
The answer is yes. And within the Go Sonoma Act, the 12% that's dedicated to build bikeways and pathways will prioritize investments on those class 1 and class 4 facilities. We can also go around town and start talking about the improvements that are going in that, you know, has been mentioned, it takes too long, but we're seeing a lot more of that stuff that's over your left shoulder than we've ever seen in the past. And there's going to be a lot more of that happening.
That'd be great. And that's kind of a fault to that. What do you guys as engineers or Victoria's elected official think of, like the quick build, you know, we're going to try this for a year or two before we really commit? Is that a viable option for getting stuff funded versus we have to do this massive planning and cycle? Can we do something as a demonstration project? I'll throw that to Johannes just because he's looking up and thinking.
Yeah, you know, I don't have an issue with the quick build projects and the pilots, but once you do that much of an investment, sometimes it's best to just plan a little better and get it done, rather than just waste a lot of money. I'll give you a quick example that we deal with all the time. People want speed bumps, right? And we install the speed bumps, and after a month, they ask us to take them back. So rather than doing that, sometimes it's better to put some rubber speed bumps and test them. But when you're talking about bike improvements, delineators, painting, and all that, that's a lot of investment that you don't want to take out and have to grind out after the end of a period.
Mm-hmm.
I'll add to that, Tim, because we've had this conversation in Healdsburg quite a bit, and it costs way more than people think. And there are other impacts that they don't consider, like how the intersections will work. If you still have that turn pocket, where the signal heads are, you know, we have to make sure that it's still going to be safe for all users. And, you know, if you end up putting in a $1 million project that is demonstration, it doesn't feel like good use of the taxpayer money, particularly if you ultimately go forward with a permanent installation. All of that gets ripped out and it's just lost. So kind of piling on to what Johannes said is sometimes it's better to plan it and do it right and do it completely. But there are certainly circumstances where a demonstration project is the right thing, and there is funding for it.
Okay. Let me make another question here. So Alexa is asking, we appreciate the point about being involved early in the process of ATP planning, active transportation planning, but given the urgency of the problem, traffic violence and climate crisis and affordability of transportation, how do we ensure the implementation of those plans, once finalized, are prioritized over other projects? Where does that advocacy need to happen? So how do we move it up on that big confusing spreadsheet, guys? What do we got to do here? Or Victoria, how do we make sure the city council is like,
Right. That's when you come to goal setting for whatever body you're trying the project is in, and you make sure that your project is prioritized. It's usually in February or March in my organization, and I'm guessing it is in most organizations, and it comes ahead of the budgeting season, which is April, May, and finalized in June. And so if you are concerned that a project that had once one priority is slipping, it's really time. I mean, I would say like it's time as soon as your budget cycle ends and you didn't get what you want to go, and let your council member know that that's a priority for next year, and to be in their ear every couple of weeks, every month, and making sure that you can count to 3 or count to 4, because I see this a lot where people they're so thrilled to have one council member who agrees with them, and I say, I'm really not the person you should be talking to about this. Go find 3 other council members who agree with you, and then you're in business. And so making sure that you're building those networks outside of your district, if you're in districts, in other parts of the city, because we're at a point in the city of Santa Rosa where everybody wants the infrastructure to be really good around their school, around their neighborhood park, and that's all well and good, but the entire council votes on our CIP budget every year. And so building bridges early on, having those, the last thing you want is to try to make a relationship with someone when you want something, right? You want to make a relationship with someone long before you want something. But the simplest answer is to be active, vocal, and not alone at goal setting. And you don't have to have each person get up and use their 3 minutes. But if you roll in with 50 people who raise their hands behind you and say they can all talk for 3 minutes, or you guys can hear that there's 50 hands in there, and please prioritize this instead of spending the next 150 minutes listening to them, you might get somewhere with that.
So it sounds, I think that's a great point, is you have to advocate, but also get your neighbors to advocate.
Yeah, it's a team sport.
Okay. And then let me ask just a quick follow-up on that, Victoria. What kind of goal, when they're saying goal settings, I've seen these, are they saying like specific goals, like we want to build, 30 curb cutouts, or is it like we want to improve pedestrian access to downtown, or what? How would we bring that to you?
So the curb cutout question would be part of the bike and pedestrian master plan, where those should be, and that it's very granular. What this is saying is like, this is more like I want this to be, I want bike and pedestrian safety to be a priority for the council this year. The council only picks 5 or 7 priorities for the year, and you want to make sure that that's the priority. And then when you get into the budget hearings, which for Santa Rosa is next Tuesday and Wednesday, no, the following, it's the 7th and 8th, whatever that is. That is, wow, we're already at May. All right, it's crazy how that happens. Next week. So then, so next week when you hear the capital improvement, the CIP budget, they will go through the projects, and that's your opportunity to say, we like these projects, we don't like these projects, here's how we would reorder them, here's what's missing, why has this gone away? That's really your chance there then to make sure that it doesn't get overlooked, because that's when the money will get attached to the projects, or at least the willingness to look for the money and put the project on top if it's general fund dollars.
And I have to add that, Victoria, in addition to all your meetings being open to the public, like James, the SCTA meetings are open, and I think they're on Zoom. And Larry, I believe Healdsburg City Council meetings are open to the public, right? And Johannes County is always, so there's always a chance for people to get involved, at meetings, or it sounds like to Victoria, make time to speak to elected officials and build those relationships before you want to do that.
Right. So I just want to make sure, just to not have any misinformation out there, the city of Santa Rosa is available to watch our meetings on Zoom. It is not interactive. You could not make remote public comment. And the worst time to get something changed is during a meeting.
Right.
It's
To have a meeting before the meeting, as it were.
long before the meeting. I mean, and I know that's really difficult for people, but if you want something like that, by the time you're sitting down at the dais, here's the dirty little secret is that, no shade on staff here, you guys are great, but staff has a tremendous amount of power in this situation. When you sit down at the staff table, for a council member in front of all of your colleagues to say, I disagree with you, the professional, when we're not the professionals, and then to get a majority of our council members to agree to overturn this professional opinion in front of, God and your mother, right? Like it's very, very, very uncomfortable. It's not saying that we don't do it or won't do it, but it's not really the moment. It's like if you object to your friends getting married, you probably aren't going to say something at the wedding. You probably will try to dissuade them from doing it long before. It's really not the best moment. It's not that it's inappropriate. It's just not very effective.
Right. Choose your moment.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, these have all been really good questions, and I appreciate what everyone's been adding to this. Before we do leave, I do want to ask if there's any final comments and last word from the different speakers, unless someone said, Tim, you forgot to ask this one burning question, but I think we've gone through it all. So I will start by asking the speakers if they have anything else they want to add or any last final statements. And then I'll move my way into the why you should join the Bicycle Coalition membership drive. So, Larry, do you want to kick us off with any final thoughts?
I think I just would like people to know that all of the public works departments that I've been involved in, and I've worked for several of them, and I've been involved with almost all of them in the county, everyone takes active transportation seriously. Everyone wants to do more and add more. I know it doesn't always feel that way, but that really is the case.
Okay, perfect. Johannes, you want to follow it up?
I saw a question from someone or a comment if we're ever going to get to the state of the Netherlands when it comes to bicycles. And being very familiar with that country, I can tell you that it's a cultural thing, and it would probably take generations for us to get there. But it's a great goal to have.
Johannes, are you originally from the Netherlands, or?
My dad, yeah, my dad.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Mhm.
it was
So I have cousins, went to school there and everything. So, yeah.
All right. Well, we'll work on that too, because I know it wasn't
Yeah.
actually it was a cultural change in the 60s and the 70s. There was a huge
It
movement
was, yeah.
in the Kindermoot
Mhm.
movement, so that was a good one. But all right, well, I'll do my part, Johannes.
Thank you.
James, do you want to give us some thoughts here, and then we'll end up with Victoria?
Yeah, so this has been referred to in my career as the pivot or the great pivot, and it's something that's been happening for I want to say around 8 or 9 years now, and it's just taken a long time to kind of turn the bus or turn the bike, however you want to view it, to get to a point where we're actually seeing these investments happen. And I can tell you the last round of highway funding that we dedicated that was from the state gas tax, it went to all active transportation projects and complete streets. It is a shift to active and shared modes that is occurring. Please help us prioritize our active transportation plan. You'll see our comprehensive transportation plan kicking off this year. And then lastly, I'll leave you all with regard to the advocacy and the funding decisions that will be coming out. That process will start approximately a year from now. That will be multiple fund sources that are at the discretion of the SCTA, RCPA, and it will be applications submitted by Larry's staff, Johannes's staff, as well as the 8 other jurisdictions. That there will be, the number one investment of our RCPA, SCTA organization, you will see will be active transportation and transit investments.
That's good to hear. Okay. And Victoria, you want to give us your final thoughts, words, or questions for us?
Yeah, just note to Johannes and James's point, this is about sunk costs. We've spent billions of dollars building for the automobile, and we're trying to turn that around. And nobody likes to cut their losses, especially when the part of it is still necessary. You know, everybody needs a paved street, whether you're on a car or a bike or on your feet. And so just understand that it is a process. It's taking a long time, and that if you get involved, and not just the regulars who are involved, but if you are a regular who is involved, thank you. Thank you for your ongoing dogged participation. I challenge you to find new people to get dogged with you. And then I challenge you to challenge them to get new people who are dogged with them. Because if it's just a few people, it is not a movement. But if it's hundreds of people out at Taco Tuesday who care about this and are willing to show up to a council meeting with their bikes instead of maybe eating tacos and make public comment, then you've really got a cultural shift underway. And to that point, make it fun. If it's fun and flashy, I'll tell you what, no politician doesn't want to be part of something that looks good on a camera or film. So, you know, don't talk to the engineers, talk to the politicians. Really, that's what you got to do. Because the engineers at the end of the day listen to the politicians, and they're just executing with their expertise what it is we're asking them to do. So if you want to blame anybody, you got to blame us. And if you want to get anything done, you got to make it fun.
I like that. And I think what I heard is we're going to hold the Santa Rosa City Council meetings at the Matote Food Truck Park during the Taco Tuesday rides.
Or bring the trucks down to our courtyard. We'll get you on it.
We'll do it. Perfect. Well, that's been wonderful. So I want to thank our expert panelists. I know Eris is going to take us out, but before she does, I want to encourage everybody listening to this, both of you, go to bikesonoma.org. Make sure you do become a member of the Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition. In addition to that smug feeling you get when you get those emails and like, I'm so awesome. There's also great information about their events and their special offers and their education stuff. And I'm not even getting paid to say that, but I'm so glad that you guys let me be the moderator for this panel. And it's great that you invited the guy that knows the least to talk the most. But Eris, I want to turn it over to you to take us out.
Okay. Thank you so much, Tim, for that. And thank you to all of our panelists for giving us your time and sharing your knowledge. I hope for all of our viewers feel at least a little bit less confused about where everything is coming from. I have also had sort of a feeling similar to what James was just saying, that we're kind of on this verge of the big shift in the autocentric paradigm, and it's been a long time coming, but over this last year or so, I really feel like it's just been being more and more and more visible, which really delights me. And to Victoria's point, I just was week before last at the biannual California Bike Summit, and Jeannie Ward-Waller, who worked for Caltrans until she was fired for being too radical about active transportation stuff. And her talking about how do we get things done? Be persistent, be constant, be annoying if we have to be, but keep showing up and keep talking to the right people. Our next newsletter should be coming out in the next couple of days, and will include information about a lot of these meetings that are coming up all over the county as all the jurisdictions are working on their active transportation plans. So as everyone here has emphasized, now is a big time to get our thoughts into these plans as much as possible. Even if they seem challenging to decipher or time consuming, this is really a point at which we can make some changes. And depending on which jurisdiction you're in, as Victoria said, you know, a lot of people makes more of a difference. But even in a small town, I live in one of the smallest towns, and I can go to a meeting and have them watch them make amendments to the plan right there in front of me. So the more that we all get out there and bring everybody else with us, the better. May is coming up, Bike Month. We've got lots of stuff coming up for National Bike Month, Bike to Work Day. So again, go to bikesonoma.org and look and see all the stuff that's coming down. We're also getting ready to have our second now Golden Spoke Award Gala, which we will be recognizing bike-friendly businesses, bike infrastructure projects, bike advocates, and we're still seeking nominations for those awards, and tickets are also available on our website. So check the email when it comes, and don't just read it and think, oh, I'll look at it later. Go ahead and click on those links and take some action. Thank you again to everyone for being here. I know we didn't get to every single question, but we will save them, and I'll follow up with folks about those. All right.
All right. Thank you very much, Eris.
Okay. Thanks to all of you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Good night.